So here is the second tutorial. This has to do with the functions of the quad sound generator, which, as I mentioned, is 4 independent channels of oscillators. And there's a few tricks we can do with this. So this is about the simplest patch that you can make with the Dataton. You've got the power supply, which is feeding power to the modules through the A and the B bus. And then below the quad sound generator, we've got the universal mixer that's taking the 4 channels. Remember, you've got the A and B buses and you've got the 4 channels. So the 4 channels are coming down now to the mixer. And with this knob up here on the top, I've assigned them a stereo panning location. So there's a frequency control. There's a waveform control. Which goes from a sine wave to a square wave. And if you set that waveform control all the way to the left, then the oscillator becomes an LFO. So that's about the highest frequency you can get, and everything else will be sub audible, basically below the hearing threshold. We'll come back to that in a second. So here's 2 of them mixed together. This is just the individual volume control for each one of the oscillators. So if you're using a mixer below that, you'll want to leave these up. But if you're using the A and the B buses, then these are the volume controls for all the different oscillators as they come out of the AB bus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the first oscillator to the low frequency mode. And I'm going to come up here and we're going to look at this top switch. This top switch actually is the voltage controlled frequency modulation. And it has several positions. Off means that there's no frequency modulation coming in. These 2 that are marked external, I'll show you more about in a second, but they depend on a signal being applied here to modulate the frequency of the oscillator. And besides that, you've got switches. So I can have the second oscillator modulated by the first one. And as you increase the frequency of the modulation, we can change the waveform of the modulation. Oh, actually, we can't. And the amount of the modulation, the depth of the modulation. So an interesting thing happens when you modulate them all in a row. So now this one is being modulated by this one. We'll turn this back up to audio rate. This one will turn up, and we'll set it to be modulated by the second one. We'll bring up the fourth one and set it to be modulated by the third. And finally, we can modulate the first by the fourth. And now you've got a chaotic system. Basically, it's 4 completely uncorrelated noise sources, and these noise sources are being fed by the oscillator previous in the chain, but because there's feedback, because the last oscillator wraps around and modulates the first one, it creates this kind of chaotic feedback frequency modulation. And it's quite good actually for generating white noise, among other things. Or strange modulation patterns. Fire noises. So let's go back to our first oscillator. Now it's got frequency and a waveform. Frequency, waveform. And now I'm going to bring in one more module that I've been hiding off screen here. This is the module that's necessary if you want to get external input into the system. This is the quad input amplifier. And apparently this sticker in Swedish means that there's a problem on the input of this channel. So I'm using the second channel. On one side it has a row of 4 jacks, one for each one of these inputs. You can also use these inputs along the top if you want to use this to control the gain of something. But it doesn't have a summing mixer. You can see that it doesn't actually have a combined output. It does, however, have the A and the B buses. So the first and the third channel go to the A bus, the second and the fourth channel go to the B bus. But you also have the individual channel outputs. So I'm taking the output of the second channel, and I can just stick this right into the frequency modulation of the first oscillator. And if I crank that up, then we'll listen to what my voice can do to it. There we go. So this is the waveform of my voice now modulating the frequency of the first oscillator. And of course, because you've got this kind of low rumble of noise in the background, when I'm not speaking, you'll also get something. And the exponential input does something slightly different. Maybe if we crank it up. Or we can try the last channel, which is a bit higher oscillator tune. Check. Testing, check, testing. Beep bop, beep bop, boop boop, beep bop, beep bop, boop boop, beep bop. So those are the basic tricks we can do with the quad sound generator. I'll be using this quad sound generator in conjunction with other modules in some of the later tutorials as a sound source that we can use, for example, with the Ringmodulator or the filter. And we can also create envelopes for this with the quad envelope shaper, which will actually be our next tutorial. Thanks for watching.